Welcome to my home studio. I have a computer with an 8-core AMD processor, 32 gig of RAM. I'm using an X32 mixer, and I'm using an X Touch with 2 X Touch extenders. Okay, let's start off by connecting the X Touch to the computer. Run the USB cable from the X Touch to the computer, plug it in. The computer should find the X Touch and load the drivers that the system needs to run. Let's get started now with setting it up in Sonar. So open up your Sonar Platinum program. When the program opens, rather than opening a project at first, go up to Edit and then click Preferences. Then your audio preferences, your MIDI, all that stuff will show up on the screen. Let's see if we can't zoom into this and make it a little easier for you to see. There, that ought to work. Okay, so go to the MIDI section. At the top, you'll see all the device drivers and that sort of thing that's in for the X32 isn't going to show up there. Those are audio drivers. So open up your control surfaces. Now this should be blank. You see mine isn't. You're going to click on the Add New Control Surface tab. Then go down to the top box and the Add Control Surfaces where it says ACT. Click on that drop down and go to the bottom of it and click Mackie Control. And then for your input, you want to make sure you have X Touch. And for the output, you want to have X Touch. That's all you should see in there if it's loaded. Now, if you don't see those, let me show you something. If they're there, just click OK and save it. If they're not there, then we need to go ahead and go to the devices and, I guess, authorize them. So you go up just a little bit to devices, click that tab, and make sure that X Touch is checked on the input and on the output. If you didn't see them before as a choice on your control surface, then close this page, go back down to the control surfaces, open it up, and in the box where it shows your Mackie Control and it doesn't show anything for input and outputs, click there and the drop down box should now have X Touch in it. Just make sure that you have X Touch as an input, X Touch as an output, and everything will work fine. The next step is we have to restart Sonar. So shut it down completely and then restart it. This time when Sonar opens up, open up one of the projects that you've been working on. You'll notice that it takes a little bit longer for that project to open since it's communicating now with the X Touch. It takes a few seconds for it to see everything. Okay, once it opens up, all of the faders in the X Touch will move to the positions that they are set on the screen, and the numbers will show up. Now that you have your main settings done, we need to go in and configure how it's going to control. So if you click on the ACT bar up in the top right hand corner on Sonar and make sure that it is set to Mackie Control at the top, then you'll probably have to close that, open it again, and click on the box on the bottom left hand corner. That's going to take you to another dialog box. This is how your settings are going to operate. Zoom in just a little bit. Yeah, that's a little better. If you look off to the left side, you'll see F1 through F8. Those are the function buttons on your X Touch. There's a lot of choices for each one, F1 through F8, and you can set it up however you want to, whatever's the most convenient for you. This is the way I run mine. But you need to find something that is more convenient or more suitable for the way you're going to control X Touch. Directly below that, you'll see your foot switches. If you have foot switches, this is what foot switch A and B will do if you're going to use one for play and stop and then maybe a record switch. Below that is your master fader. Your master fader is not the one that's at the bottom of your track or at the far right of your console view. The master is the entire output fader. So instead of having master in there, which you would think on your master fader, that's what you would want, you're going to want to click on that and select bus, because truly it's not the master fader, it's the bus fader. And then the number 1 that's to the right of that, if you have a project open, it'll be there. This is for your jog wheel. The jog wheel on the X Touch controls the timeline on your project. You can see the timeline moves back and forth when I turn the jog wheel on the X Touch. So what is listed here on this dialog screen is how far that's going to move, whether it's going to be in measures, beats, or ticks. If you have it in measures, it moves further each time you click it. Beats is what I have mine set to, and ticks is actually a little shorter, so if you want to get a little finer definition. But if you're going a long ways, it works for measures. Below that is your options. So below the options, the only things you really need to click there are the faders. When you touch them, it selects the track or the channel, and then below, it's going to select any highlighted track. So if you highlight it with your mouse, that'll do it. Below that section, it's going to come out of the box as off. And you'll see a couple choices below it. Make sure that you go to the bottom of that list and click on Signal LEDs and Meters. That will let your meters that you see on your screen also be displayed on the X Touch. You won't have to configure anything yet, so just go ahead and hit the X in the corner and close out the box. Now, like I said before, always restart Sonar when you make a change. And sometimes I will go as far as restarting my entire computer, but you should always make sure that you restart Sonar. Now that your system is set up, let's verify the operation. When you open your project, X Touch should automatically match what your volume faders are on your project. For instance, the scribble strips across the top should be numbered 1 through 8. If you have track names in there, those will show up instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, the number should be underneath it. Look off to the right, you see your time code, and then underneath that is all your function switches for the F1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that we looked at earlier. And also below that is your jog wheel. The scribble strips will not change color. Even though all of the brochures and literature show colors on the scribble strips, that won't work with Sonar. When you touch the slider on the X Touch, it selects that track. When you move your fader on the X Touch, it will move the matching fader on Sonar. So everything that you normally would do on Sonar with a mouse, you can now do on your X Touch. If you look right above the fader on Sonar, you will see that the pan also works from the X Touch. Above that, you will see you have your mute button, your solo button, and your record arm button. So when you push the mute button, the amp will light up. The solo button will light up on the screen also, and top button will arm your track for recording. Now let's add the X Touch extender to the X Touch. This gives us the ability to look at 16 tracks at one time instead of 8. Let's get started by connecting the USB cable to the output side of the X Touch and plug it into the input side of the X Touch extender. Power them up, let your computer load the drivers that it needs. Now that the X Touch extender is connected to the X Touch, let's open up Sonar and we're going to create another control surface, just like we did before with the X Touch. We're going to start by clicking on Edit and Preferences. Then we're going to go down to the MIDI section and Control Surfaces. This time when we do add a new control surface, let me zoom in a little bit. There you go. That's better. We're going to choose X Touch Extender this time. And then in the input port, we should also choose X Touch Extender. And for the output port, we should choose X Touch Extender. Now again, if X Touch Extender doesn't show up in there, then we need to go up into the devices. So close this box out, go up to devices, and click on the X Touch Extender. Make sure X Touch Extender and X Touch are both clicked on both the input ports and the output ports. Then go back to the device manager. Since you've already created this device, click on the drop-down menu next to the device, then click on X Touch Extender for input, X Touch Extender for output. When this is done, click Apply, and then click OK, and then close Sonar out, just to be safe. Now let's open Sonar again. This time when Sonar opens up, we're going to choose a different project. This one looks good. One thing you'll notice that as soon as a project opens up, your X Touch and your X Touch Extender should both, all the faders should move, and they will look identical. And when you look at the X Touch and the X Touch Extender, they'll both be numbered tracks 1 through 8 and 1 through 8. Well, that's not going to work. You don't want to have two 1 through 8 control surfaces. So we need to fix that. This part is easy. We've already done all the setup in the X Touch. So now all we need to do is set up the configuration of the X Touch and the X Touch Extender. Here's how we're going to do that. Click on the ACT again. Now just leave it in Mackie control. You don't need to change that. Click on the box in the bottom left-hand corner so that your dialog box opens up again. Here, I'll zoom in on this just a little bit so it's a little easier to see. We set it all up already in the X Touch. This time, the only thing that we need to do is go down to the control layout. When you click on this, you will see on your X Touch Extender, it'll say 1 through 8. Your X Touch will say 1 through 8. Using the first fader knob, you can change the lower address coming into that device. So I'll set mine up at channel 9 so that my X Touch Extender is channels 1 through 8. My X Touch is channel 9 through 16. Now that that's finished, you can close out of that dialog box. You'll notice on the left side of your track view one color strip for the X Touch Extender on 1 through 8 and another color strip for the X Touch on 9 through 16. So close out Sonar again. Is it always necessary? I don't know. It tends to work for me. Open your project up again. Let's verify the operation. You'll notice it takes just a little bit longer now than it did before because you're opening two devices. So just be patient and wait for the projects to open up so that when they do, we can verify the operation of both devices to make sure they're working as we had set them up. Verify that everything is marked correctly and the names you have in the tracks appear in your X Touch and your X Touch Extender, and then use the transport buttons on the X Touch and try to control it from both devices. This is how I set up my X Touch and my X Touch extenders. I have the X Touch in the middle because I wanted the transport control in the center. The X Touch extender on the left is channels 1 through 8. X Touch is 9 through 16. And the X Touch extender on the right is 17 through 24. Things get a little bit tricky when we're connecting these, and you're going to need to get a couple other items. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. I'd like to go over something that we find in the installation manual. When you buy the X Touch extender, you get the book with it. And you'll go into the X Touch extender hookups, and it shows that you can plug by USB into the X Touch and daisy chain up to 3 X Touch extenders. And technically that is true in a lot of DAWs, but it will not work in Sonar. Sonar will let you do the X Touch and 1 X Touch extender. You do have an option. You can control 3 X Touch extenders and the X Touch by a network, but you cannot do it by daisy chaining USBs. It's a naming thing. When you set up your second USB connection, it has to have a different name than the first X Touch extender, and Sonar won't give it that. So we have to find an alternative. Let's talk about what that could be. After doing a lot of research on the internet, I came up with an easy and relatively inexpensive way to connect this system by a network. So I was off to, I won't mention any names, the local yellow and blue electronics store, and I picked up a 5-port Ethernet switch. I bought a 5-port because I wanted an option for expansion if I decided to add yet another X Touch extender. Then I made a trip to my local home improvement store, and I picked up some Ethernet cables, a short one to go from the switch to the X Touch extender, and a longer one to go from the switch to the computer. This is my $30 networking solution. I just mounted the switch under the console to get it out of the way. It has its own power adapter out of the box, so all I have to do is plug into it from the X Touch and plug into it from the computer with the Cat5 cables that I bought. Now we need to set up the network you've just created in your computer. Your computer has to actually be able to communicate with this through the network. So you have now your own private network. So go down to the bottom of the screen and you can click on network settings, a little antenna looking thing, or you can go into control panel and open up your settings there in network. Scroll down to the network settings, and then if you're connected wirelessly, you'll see that one. And if your switch is connected correctly, you will see the one that says Ethernet. It has no name, it's just the Ethernet because we haven't named it yet. When you click on that, it will take you to a screen. Let's zoom in a little bit here. This is the Ethernet status screen. It tells that the system is actually communicating. You can see what's sent and received. From this screen, you're going to want to go down and click on the Properties tab. Once you've done that, you can find the line that says Internet Protocol TCP/IP version 4. You can double click it, or you can click it once and then click Properties, and it will take you to this page. This is your Internet Protocol or IP setup. The system will come typically out of the box that says Obtain IP address automatically. That is so that when you're communicating on a network, it will assign an IP address to your computer. But that's not the case here. You're creating your own. So you need to use the following IP address. Now on your X Touch extender, you will see the IP address of that extender. You need to be in that same basic neighborhood. So if it is 196.154.106.148, then you need to set something up near that So the only thing that will change is the last three numbers. The first three sets of numbers have to be exactly like what's on the display of your X Touch extender now that is connected by a network. I set mine at 169.254.106.145. That way I know I can communicate. The line below it that says subnet mask, when you click in that box, it will auto-populate at the 255.255.255.0. Once you're finished with that, you can just close all of the boxes. Just click OK and then close, and X out of everything. Now you should be able to communicate between your switch, your X Touch extender, and your computer. Now that you have your computer set up, let's go onto the internet. Just Google RTP MIDI. And it should give you several choices, but open the Tobias Ericsson page and you'll see a free download for an RTP MIDI driver. You will have to have this in your computer for this to operate. Download the driver and install it in your computer. Let's close out of this and open up the driver and see what we have to do from there. When you open up the driver, this window is going to show up. I think we better maybe zoom in on this a little bit so we can see it. There we go. Once this window opens up at the top in the box, you'll see where it says My Sessions. And when you click on the plus sign, because that'll be blank the first time you open it, when you click on the plus sign, it will come up and ask you to add a session. The session is going to be your computer, your desktop, whatever you named that network in your computer, that's what's going to show up there. In just a little bit, we'll go into the directory and set that up. I had mentioned that the IP address would be displayed on the front of the X Touch extender. It will show up once you're communicating between your computer and the X Touch, and it will give the IP address that's default, and then underneath it, it'll just say wait, because it's not communicating with Sonar yet. So that is the number that we have to use when we set up the system. I mentioned before, if you'd like to change that IP address, you can. Just follow the instructions in the installation manual. It's very easy. So, in the meantime, let's go up and create our directory. We're going to open again that RTP MIDI driver that we had opened before where we set up the session. Get a little bit closer here. Now we're going to finish our setup. Now that we have our session and it says so over there under the local name, we're going to go down to directory and click on the plus button and this little window will appear. In the top line, you can name it whatever you want. X Touch extender number 2. I did that and it showed up as X Touch in that little box. Underneath there, where it says IP/port, you're going to type in the IP address that was displayed on the X Touch extender scribble strips. So in my case, I did 169.254.106.148. And then you type in a colon and enter the port. Well, where do I find the port number? If you look in the upper right-hand corner of the larger box back behind, you will see where it says port 5004. So type in the IP address just exactly like it's displayed, then colon 5004, and then the OK button will be highlighted so you can click OK. And once you have done that, it will show up in the directory box and then click connect. and it will be displayed here. That tells us that everything is now communicating. When you look back at the X Touch extender, once it's communicating, the IP and wait signal goes away, and those just turn blank until you open a project. Okay, now that we've set up our network, we're communicating with the computer. Let's go ahead and open Sonar Platinum and create another control surface. In order to do that, we'll go to Edit, and then Preferences, just like before. And now, like we haven't been through this, but let's go through it again. Click on Control Surface. Then move up to the upper right-hand corner and add a control surface. Up at the top screen, we're going to make this control surface another Mackie XT or an extender. And then for your input port, you want to choose the name of the network or the computer name or whatever it was set up in your driver as your input port. Don't choose one of the others. Only choose the computer name. And then for your output port, also choose that. And then if you don't see them again, go up to Devices, make sure there is a check mark in front of the computer name. Mine says desktop and then a number. Make sure you choose that for the input and for the output ports. Then, of course, apply and OK. And you may have to go down and change it again after you set it up. As usual, we're going to close out of Sonar, and then we're going to open Platinum again. We have to take the next step just like we did before. It might take just a little bit longer now for everything to open up because we're communicating with 3 devices instead of 1. So open your project up. It's having to make some changes, so it may take a little longer. Now, just like we did the other 2 times, once the project is open, you're going to need to slide up to the right-hand side and click on the ACT button again. You'll notice in the top tab, you now have Mackie and 2 Mackie extender controls. Leave it on Mackie control. Open it again here. Click in the bottom left-hand corner, just like we did before. And again, the only thing we have to do is set up our control. We had done this before, and we set up the X Touch extender as 1 through 8, and then the X Touch as 9 through 16. In this case, we're going to set up the next X Touch extender as 17 through 24. To do that, you're going to use the top left-hand panning knob, change it to 17, and then hit that button again, which just says press again to exit. Now everything should be set up. We should have all 24 tracks showing, so the X Touch extender, last one, should now show 17 through 24. You should verify the operation of everything, making sure that when you open your project, it is displaying 17 through 24, or how many tracks are on. I have 23 on this one. In addition to that, all of the faders should move in the position that they are set up on your console view on Sonar Platinum. So you should now have all three control surfaces working correctly. I needed a way to mount these so they were easy to use, and this I thought was going to work the best. I used a music stand. I built a little L-shaped shelf out of plywood and a 2x4 that I ripped down to 3 inches. Took about 8 drywall screws to hold the two together, painted it flat black, bolted it to the music stand. Now the good thing is I can angle this at any angle I want it. If I want it laying more flat, I can lay it more flat. If I want it standing more upright and easier for me to control, I can do that. It will pivot on the top and is just very easy to get to. I already owned the music stand, so I just thought it worked quite well, and it holds their weight very well. I hope you found this video helpful and it made this whole process easier for you.